Okay, we'll go ahead and start our budget workshop, and the illustrious Mr. Baldwin will start this off. It's all yours, Mr. Baldwin.
Testing.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's on.
All right, testing there. All right, thank you everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the budget workshop. I come here today on the back of the long-range financial forecast that we provided. So this is there will be some revenue updated numbers in this presentation. Of course, it's a live budget until the city manager's proposed budget. But I come to you with good information, with good news. The first one is you have your binders in front of you, about 200 pages worth of information. I plan on simplifying that for you in this presentation. I promise not to take 1 minute per page in your English.
Wait, we got one hot. Is it both mics hot at one time? Or?
No, both should be.
Both, okay, I'm scared.
Are you guys hearing me okay? It's kind of...
Yeah, there you are.
That's what I was asking.
I'm breathing right into it right now.
There you go.
There he is.
It comes and goes on its own.
I'll turn this one off.
Just finished the installation today
Oh, wow.
of new courtroom audio.
Okay.
I don't know that
Great day
it's
to
been
test
fully
it out.
tested. Well, they just finished.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah, much better. There you go.
It's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just keep talking. So
Okay. If I just keep talking, then it shows up.
Yes. Don't breathe.
So that means run-on sentences. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Fill the dead air. All right, so I come with good news. All of our funds are in strong financial positions. So that's the other good news here. All right, so let's get started. So for our workshop agenda, we'll look at the budget calendar and see where we are today, what's remaining in our budget calendar. We'll look at our base budgets, give an overview of the status of our base budgets, and then look at supplemental requests. So first of all, a compensation request and other supplemental requests from departments. I'll then come back after Gina and Lauren's presentation and provide a summary of what the budget looks like then after the supplemental requests are put in the budget. So moving to our budget calendar. Again, last month we provided a long-range financial forecast. Building off of that now, as we build the budget, August 5th is the deadline for Dallas County to submit their completed no new revenue and voter-approved tax rate worksheets. So we don't have that information in the numbers that you're seeing here. Property tax information is subject to change. On August 11th, that Thursday, the Municipal Development District will have a board meeting to approve their final budget, which you'll see in the budget brought forward to you on September 6th. On August 15th, the city manager will present the proposed budget. On August 18th, which is after the city manager's proposed budget, you'll have a joint meeting with the EDC. After that joint meeting, the EDC will get together and finalize their budget request. So if there are any changes in the EDC budget, we'll point that out in the September 6th agenda item to you requesting budget adoption. So you'll see those changes if there are any. On August 22nd and 25th, we will post notice of public hearing, explanation of tax rates, and all of that leads up to September 6th, bringing forward to you the budget for adoption. So as an overview of City of Saxe budgeting, the budget consists of a base budget and recommended supplemental requests. So the first is the base budget. You can think of that as the prior year's budget and then taking away any one-time items and any capital project funding. So that gives you the base that we start looking at for this budget. It's the cost of continuing your existing service levels. It includes the revenues of the fresh look that I took in preparing the revenues for these funds, and also the expenditures. Now, just because I'm saying that the base budget is the prior year budget taking out the one-time items, it doesn't mean that that's the given budget. All of these numbers are scrutinized by department staff, by the city manager, so there's no given base budget and no given base budget increase. No COLA is just given. So everything's scrutinized and reviewed as we move forward to the information provided tonight. And then there's supplemental requests, and these are requests for additional budget. It's program enhancements, service enhancements, and other one-time items. So with that, I'll start with the base budget. So the base budget for the general fund brought forward to you and in your binders includes revenues. Now I had to make some assumptions because we don't yet have all of our property tax information. Our taxable certified value, we do have that information. That came from the counties. That citywide information, or citywide number is $3.57 billion of certified value. That's a 25% increase in certified value from the prior year. Our tax rate is to be determined. More information will be provided to the Finance Department by August 5th, and we'll bring it forward to you on August 15th in the City Manager's proposed budget. We're assuming that we're not going to be able to collect all of the property tax revenues, that there will be some delinquencies. And overall, that the revenue estimated in this budget is about 4.6% increase from year-to-date collections, or 6% increase over the prior year budget. Now, I took a conservative look at our major revenues. In fact, most of the revenues in this budget are looking at projections for fiscal year 22, and then pretty much budgeting it flat in this budget. So we are budgeting conservatively in this budget. That's sales tax, franchise fees, and permit revenues are budgeted pretty flat. Expenditures are also conservative. We looked at the Hub International information, where they told us that our policy increase would be we're looking at a 26% increase over prior year. That's included in the budget that we're looking at today. So with that said, with those assumptions, let's look fund by fund, starting with revenues and then expenditures. So looking at general fund revenue, you can see the property tax assumptions on that first line in the table here show an increase of $800,000 from the prior year. I'll honestly, rather than going through all of the detail, just in summary, again, these revenues here are looking at the projections, and our 22-23 budget is pretty much assuming flat, no growth over current year projections. So collections on sales tax, for example, right now are about $2 million through June, 3/4 of the way through the year. So it's a pretty easy assumption to assume that we can reach in the next fiscal year, as we're seeing 15+% growth year over year, that we could be at 2.6 million or 2.7 million by 2023. Overall, with these revenue increases, we have an overall general fund growth of 14% in our revenues. Now, you've noticed in the monitoring reports, year to date through June, we're over 100% collected on our general fund revenues. So we've been very conservative. We had COVID, there were just reasons to be conservative in the past. But for years in a row, we've over-collected significantly, which has led to large fund balance increases. So I'm kind of taking a realistic approach and just making sure now that we're more out of the clear on COVID, I'm just recognizing the revenues that are there. And yet, to my prior point, still being conservative with what we're projecting for the future. So that 14% growth isn't me being aggressive and pushing on the pedal on revenue assumptions. It's really catching up to what we're seeing. Looking at our general fund expenditures, I'm showing here over the next 2 slides, department by department alphabetically, and showing the 2022 operating budget and then the preliminary budget that you'll see in your binders. Of note, so the city manager's office has a budget increase there of 48%. That's primarily due to a position move from, on the next slide, you'll see neighborhood services, a position moved just between departments. And then we have an increase in an office administrator position. Combined services is showing a 7% increase, that's $28,000. We had a 22% or $22,000 increase in our general liability property insurance. Health plan fees have increased $5,000. So really we're just capturing what we're seeing. in rate updates. Development services is showing almost $300,000 of an increase. That's a 35% increase. However, that's due to a professional services building permit contract. So we have a separate professional services group that's doing building permit. You'll see a separate line item, and really this is a program that covers itself. So if you take out $275,000, which is just recognizing a contract that generates more revenue than it costs, then development services budget is increasing 2%. One other note before I move on, there's an asterisk there, which is saying that it's excluding one-time supplementals and capital project funding. I could make the numbers look really good looking at prior year adopted budget to current year requested budget. We could show big declines if I had all of those one-time items in there. I've taken those out so we see an apples to apples comparison. So even with that reduction in 2022 budget, as we look and compare it to 2023, we're still seeing these small percents of growth. Moving on to human resources through streets. Information technology has a $90,000 increase. That's 11% growth, and that's simply due to technology and cost increases. Neighborhood services, I alluded to that on the last.
Next slide.
Thank you. Neighborhood services, I alluded to that on the last slide. There was a position moved from neighborhood services to the city manager's office. So our current CPI environment is 9 or 10% for the consumer price index. So again, I just want to point out on this expenditure side that budget requests you're seeing 2%, 3%. So we've really taken the effort to reduce our budget as much as possible to make sure that we're requesting budgets that are truly needed and not just a growth from prior year budget. So we've looked at the revenues and the expenditures. Now if we look at the two together, we'll see that revenues are growing at 14%. That's that revenue catch-up that I was speaking to. And that our operating expenses are growing by 4%. Again, with the Hub International health increase of 26%, I think that's pretty remarkable to see an overall 4% increase in the base general fund budget. I'll then move to the utility fund. Our assumptions in the utility fund are following a 2019 rate study that water rates will increase by 2% this year and sewer rates will increase by 3% this year. On the expenditure side, we've received word from North Texas Municipal Water District. Their rate is going to go up 13.1%. They have chemical costs, logistical issues. They're seeing the same personnel hiring issues that we're seeing in many others around the region. So that's leading to their 13.1% increase. And Garland sewer treatment rates are increasing by 2%. Looking at utility fund revenue, our water revenue, so taking into account current year's revenue projections and that water rate increase, water revenue is growing by 6%, sewer by 3%, kind of updating the revenues here to show expected interest in this current economic environment. The good side is that we are seeing higher rates on CDs and other investments for a total overall revenue increase of 5%. So in summary, for the utility fund, let me actually break it down by department within the utility fund. Utility administration is growing by 3%. Water operations, you see that $400,000 increase. $500,000 of that is due to the North Texas Municipal Water District. And then that would otherwise lead to the base budget on water operations is going down. Well, that's just due to a position shift between sewer operations and water operations. So overall, you're seeing a 6% growth in the utility fund expenditure budget. Drainage is showing there as blank, and that's because drainage expenses are simply capital project expenses. And so when I take those out to do an apples to apples comparison, then there's nothing left to review. So in summary, to look at the utility fund, again, 5% growth in revenues, 6% growth in operating expenses leads to a slight growth of that $9,852 in fund balance. So when you do an apples to apples comparison, everything's about even, and we're just slightly growing our fund balance. Moving on to debt service. For debt service, for the numbers that you're seeing in your binder, no change in tax rate for the debt service rate is assumed. For the taxable value, I mentioned that the total taxable certified value is $3.58 billion. Well, when you back out freeze values and you back out the TERS that we have, then we get to the taxable value is 2.92. That's assumed here on the debt service rate. Again, when you look at a revenue collection rate of 99.5%, and we'll see what that does for our overall revenue and expenditures.
David,
Yeah.
what's the freeze value?
The freeze values.
Hold on. I just have to remind everyone, since we are videoing and recording this for later, they won't hear you in the show mic.
And we do have boundary microphones here
Okay.
that are quite sensitive,
Oh,
and they pick up tapping on your phone. The Charter Review Commission knows this.
No
So
cookies.
we can use the microphone if you'd like, but these are very, very sensitive
okay. Well,
microphones.
she's right here.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
was just curious what the less freeze value is.
So City of Saxe has two exemptions at $50,000 each. One is people over 65 can freeze that tax rate. So that's a $50,000 exemption. And then there's also a disabled persons
Okay, that's what that
exemption.
is. All right.
If we take those exemptions and then we freeze that tax rate forevermore while that person is at that property, that is lost certified value. So it's taking that into account.
Okay.
All right, so summarizing debt service, you can see revenues are growing 18%. That is due to the property tax rate assumptions. And on the expense side, we're seeing a 15% increase. As you recall, in 2022, we had the bond sale, and so that's including the debt service on that in 2023. And then some 2020 tax notes rolled off, so those will be paid. What I'm excluding here, again, for this apples to apples comparison, is our debt service fund in 2022 had $1.7 million from some tax notes that we purchased. The purpose of that was for some fire equipment, fire truck and ambulance. That is money in, and then it was transferred very quickly out to our vehicle equipment replacement fund. So I took out that $1.7 million so you can see an apples to apples comparison. Sorry, now I'm caught up on the slides. Moving on to Saxe Economic Development Corporation. This is how the Economic Development Corporation stands now. Again, they're going to have a meeting on August 18th, so this is subject to change a little bit. We'll let you know. So because that's on the 18th, we'll let you know at the budget adoption in that agenda memo if there are any changes to the budget. For the revenue increase, similar to the general fund, is just recognizing sales tax revenues that are there, that we're actually seeing. So that's that budget increase. And then as a success story, expenditures are going down in that fund. Moving to the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Fund, I'm showing here revenue allocations. These are simply transfers from the general fund. As we purchase a vehicle, we transfer funds from the general fund in order to set aside for future replacement of those vehicles. So the increases here are going to be anytime you purchase a vehicle, then you take that cost divided by the number of years of expected life, and you set that money aside just for planning purposes. So Animal Services has in their 2021-22 adopted budget the purchase of a box truck. And so that's why you're seeing just a $5,000 increase between the two budget years. Facility maintenance has a purchase of a scissor lift, and a couple of other items. IT, information technology, shows a growth of $25,000. That replacement was set aside, I believe, beginning in about 2020. And so honestly, we're just playing catch up, trying to set aside reasonable amounts and increase that because we have a whole lot of equipment these days with technology. And so this is just a function of knowing that costs are going up, knowing that we have a lot of electronic items that will need to be replaced in the future. We're catching up on that replacement. Moving to the next page, so continuing on in the departments, just showing their growth rate. Again, the growth rates here are just based on the prior year, just adding of assets. I mentioned the tax note that I took out in debt service, that $1.7 million, that the debt service fund was just transferring money to the vehicle equipment replacement fund. And you see that that amount in 2022 in the adopted budget, but not, of course, budgeted in 2023. Looking at VERF expenditures, I'm not showing any. So you can see the 2022 adopted budget VERF expenditures. All of these vehicle equipment replacement fund expenditures will show up as supplementals later in this presentation. And so that's why, as a base budget, there's nothing here for expenditures. So with that, I'll move to the first of the supplemental items, which is a compensation update.
With the short person. Okay. All right, Mayor and Council, as I've talked about since I came to SACSI about 7 years ago, the most important thing in terms of what we do is the service we provide. And the only way we can provide that service is through good people. And what we certainly have seen and we've talked about with you in the last several months is this war on talent. And any of you that are trying to hire anybody right now understand how challenging that can be because it's a great market to be looking for a job. And so what we want to do is make sure that we do two very important things. Number one is I want to retain the outstanding employees that we have. That is the most important thing to me. Certainly because, again, we can't provide the service we want to provide if we don't do that. But second, we want to be able to recruit. And for us to be able to recruit, we have to be able to be competitive in the market. And so really what we're looking at here is an opportunity to present you with a package that we feel through a lot of study and process over the last several months really is the most important item that I'll be bringing to you in the budget. And so I will be presenting this kind of in some detail and sort of my philosophy through this and answer any questions that you have. So I've talked about this before, really just kind of as a reminder, and certainly for those of you that are new in the City Council, compensation really has two important components to it. One is certainly looking at the market compatibility and the market comparability of our positions. How are we placed in the market and what is that position worth? So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it is cost of living adjustments or in-grade movements for somebody in a position. And so what is the value of the position in terms of the entire range, but then also the in-grade movement and adjustments that happen for that position. That's really what comprises what we call balanced compensation. You really need to look at both of those components to make sure that you have the right compensation. And so, you know, when we talk about whole pay range and what does that mean, it really is about, like I said, market increases that really try to approximate as best as we can the value of a position within the market. So we do this by adjusting the entire pay range. But this increase, again, it's so important to us for market compatibility and comparisons to make sure that we are able to recruit the kind of people that we want to recruit. Just as a reminder, our market cities, we established a set of market cities when I got here 7 years ago, and we've made some adjustments to that, and back in 2019, really kind of tightened the list up a little bit. But you can see here, these are the cities that the council agreed and approved to really be our market comparator cities. And a couple comments I just want to make about this to make sure everybody understands what we mean by a market comparator city. It's cities that we lose employees to when they leave. We do exit interviews and we ask employees where they're going. So oftentimes they are going to cities such as the ones on this list. Also, we want to make sure that we're looking at the cities around us, because if someone's willing to come work here, they're probably willing to go work at anything around us as well. And so we want to see what those cities are offering. And then we're also looking at cities that are similar in size and using those as comparators. Again, this really gives us kind of a wide range because these cities are all varying in size and type for us to be able to understand, okay, what does our market look like for us? Again, it's not perfect, but I think that it really gives us some sort of benchmark to be able to work within as we're trying to market adjust, if you will, our salaries. So as I said, the second piece of compensation is really the in-grade adjustments. So this is adjusting an employee salary, whether it's due to achievement, goals, or other criteria. Oftentimes, as I've been here, it's really been more of a cost of living adjustment. But this part of the compensation really allows our employees to progress through the pay range, and really importantly, it helps us to reduce salary compression. Because what we want to make sure is that as we bring in new employees, those employees aren't making more money than the people that have been here longer. So what we want to make sure is that we have a pay plan that allows people to progress through it, and that we're not creating compression with people who have not been here as long, and we can reward the people that have been here longer and have more experience, so everyone's moving equally through the pay range. I know I'll talk about this till I'm blue in the face, but I want to make sure everybody understands kind of where we're at on this. It is the war for talent, and this is just a couple of the articles that we've talked about, things that I've sent out to you, things that I've been talking about in the organization, and we presented this past spring to you. We are seeing increased competition. We compete with the private sector, and obviously we certainly can't pay to the level that they can, but we've got to figure out how we can continue to stay competitive in the job market and be able to hire the people that we want to hire. In particular, we've had the Assistant Director of Public Works position open since November. And I've had conversations with some of you one-on-one, and just talking with staff about this is we could have hired somebody, but it wouldn't have been the right somebody. But we would have paid them a lot less and not had really who we want in this organization. And so it's so important that we hire the right people, but we've got to be, again, competitive in the job market with our salaries in order to get the types of people here that we want. So really, we've heard about the Great Resignation and what's happened as a result of COVID, and a lot of folks really just making some big fundamental shifts in their expectations of the workforce, and it really has changed the playing field. But local governments have to be able to compete too, and not only with the private sector, but we're competing with each other because we all want to get the best and the brightest. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at a regional meeting of city managers, and we were talking about what is it that we all can do to be able to get more competitive and get the kind of folks that we're looking for. And I laughed a little bit because several of the folks in the room were like, well, I'm a baby boomer and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm talking about 410s and flexible and remote work schedules, and they're like, I've been fighting casual dress and all these things, but they're like, I can't get people. And so we've got to figure out how we can become more competitive and do all of these types of things. I mean, as you've seen, we've had a summer schedule, which has worked out really well. The employees seem to really like it. We've gone to casual dress. The employees seem to like that as well. We've talked about potentially some remote work opportunities. I'm a little more hesitant on that, but I think that there are positions that could be eligible for that. We're looking at changes in our leave policies and other benefits right now. As I've talked to you about, we have the Employee Culture Committee. We're trying to figure out different ways of things that will make employees happier to be here and things that they would like to see. But the bottom line is it's money. I mean, it comes down to compensation. And we can do all these other things and create a great work environment, but if we are significantly paying less than other communities around us, we're always going to lose out. It's just the way of the world. So this is what we said we'd do back in April when we talked about this. We've gone through and done our market study for all our positions to see where we stand in the region. We definitely have tried to use some unique recruiting strategies, and I really appreciate all the work that the HR department has done with putting QR codes on the back of our vehicles and going and doing job fairs and all the kinds of things that they can think of to try to get folks here. We're trying to, again, fight employee burnout and stress. We've been looking at staffing composition, and that's what you're going to see in the budget, some proposals for additional positions, because we're struggling with all the work that we're doing, and you've seen we're growing and we've got all this great revenue, but we don't have enough people to do the work oftentimes. We're trying to revamp our existing employee recognition, again, evaluating our benefits and not just looking at health, but also mental, physical, and financial wellness, because our employees have expressed interest in those things as well. But we need to understand what our why is. So we're doing an employee engagement survey that'll be coming. We're looking at some different ways to brand our recruitment efforts, to sell our community through different videos and things like that, to try to tell people why we're different and why they should come work here. Working very hard on creating a culture that makes us unique and makes us a good place to be. I mean, even if it's things as simple as HR stocked all the freezers a couple Fridays ago with ice cream and just said, we want you to know we appreciate you and it's hot outside. There's ice cream in your freezer, go ahead and go get it. I think it's just little things to show employees we care and that we want them here and they matter to us. And again, the Employee Engagement Committee, we've been working on that as well, trying to get continuous ideas and more things that we can do to retain our employees. As I talked about, job fairs, message boards, we're trying any recruiting techniques. There's no wrong technique at this point. We're trying to just figure things out. We're working to speed up the hiring process. If we find somebody that we like, we're working as fast as we can to try to get them in the door and get them started. Because what we're finding is that if we wait too long to make an offer, they're already got an offer. And so we're trying to compress that as fast as we can to see that we can make offers to folks quicker than in a week. We need to try to do it within a couple of days. As you know, we implemented the pilot alternate schedule, casual dress code, the culture committee. We've increased employee recognitions. We're looking at our policies and procedures manual, trying to make some changes to that to see if there are some policies that we can change and things that we can do that might be more favorable for employees. But again, the full-scale market analysis is what you're going to see here in just a few moments. Again, there's our QR code at the bottom. You need a SACSI job. We have one. So my recommendation based on the comprehensive market analysis, and I want you to know there's been an analysis of every position in the city. And we have looked at each position individually and looked at it by job family and looked at them at all different ways that you can possibly look at them. But essentially the recommendation that we're making is for sworn public safety personnel, which would be police and fire, adjusting their current step plan for market increases to place our positions at mid-market of the cities that are our comparators, and then also providing for a an in-grade one-step increase effective October. Then for our general employees, we want to modify all the pay ranges again to reflect that market increase, to place all the positions at mid-market of our comparators. Set $15 as our minimum pay for pay range at the lowest classified positions, provide in-grade pay increases to maintain all employees at the same percentage achieved in the current pay range when they're moved to the new pay range, effective October of 2022. So this is a big change. I am proposing some major shifts in our pay plan, some large increases. You're going to see, obviously, as you look at the supplementals, this is the biggest category that we have. And I think it is essential to be able to, again, retain who we want to retain, but then also be able to attract who we're looking to attract in our vacant positions. So with that, I will turn it over to Lauren, and she is going to talk about supplemental requests.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So in the past, we have obviously brought supplementals to you all before as part of the budget process. Previously, they were listed out as part of the presentation, but the detail was contained in your notebook. This time around, we want to spend a little more time talking about what is a supplemental and go over very briefly what our departments are asking for as a part of this budget this year. Certainly, I will go over some high-level details, but if you have any questions about what's listed, there's a tremendous amount of detail in your packets, but then we also have all of our department heads here if you have a specific question. So as David alluded to earlier, supplemental requests are programmatic enhancements. These go above and beyond what's in the base budget, what our operating budgets are year over year. They can be program enhancements, service enhancements, or one-time events. As you know, we've had some turnover in department heads and leadership positions. So you have, and you will see this reflected in the supplemental request, some changes in direction that we want to go to. As people have taken on new roles, they've looked at process improvements and changing the way that we do things. Additionally, as we've come out of COVID, I say that with a little asterisk next to it, knowing that we're seeing higher infections, but we're starting to see some sense of normal coming out of the COVID years and some resumption of normal activities relative to some of our facilities. So we want to make some programmatic enhancements there as well. And then, of course, one-time items, typically these include equipment, and then, of course, positions, as Ms. Nash alluded to. So the compensation proposal, that's top of the list on the supplemental sheet that you all have, and Ms. Nash explained that in detail. You'll also note that we have a city manager charter contingency. As we were reviewing the charter, staff reviewed the charter as well with our city attorney. And as we've had a changeover in leadership in our finance department, we observed that there's a component of the charter that does allow for a contingency line item. It actually allows for, I believe, up to 7% of total general fund operating revenues. That is quite a lot of money. I believe close to $1.3 million. We're asking for $100,000 here. That just provides an emergency line item that will be included in the combined services portion of the budget that allows us to, if there's a project that comes up in the middle of the year that we didn't anticipate, or an initiative that we want to take advantage of when the timing is right, it gives us some flexibility to do that outside of waiting for the budget process to come through. Logo transition, as you all know and will recall, we have been slowly transitioning the city's logo over to the former logo, to the current model. We started that initiative really in 2020. We slowly but surely whittled away at existing supplies because we're government employees and we would never want to waste anything. So as folks used up their cards, their letterhead, we transitioned that over to new logo, but we're at the point in the process where we need to start paying for some official transition of city vehicles and some signage. So you'll see that detail listed there. Just for you, this is a public information request tracking system. Right now, public information requests are handled through an Excel tracking system. It's a very manual process, and so this would give our city secretary some flexibility to streamline that, provide automated responses to requesters, and some tracking. A planner position is.
Is that a, speak, I guess. Is that just a one-time expense, or is that an annual expense?
That's an annual expense.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As Ms. Nash alluded to, we are requesting several positions as part of this budget process. And as you can see, if you look out the window, we do have quite a bit of development activity that's reflected in the request for the planner position. Right now, Matt Robinson, our director, is also our full-time planner, so he has quite a full plate, and this position would provide some relief for him on the plan review and development side of things. In that same vein, a combination building inspector, as a complement to all the growth and the permitting activity, we do have a need for building inspectors to go check on the development and the construction as it progresses. Right now, we have 2 full-time combination building inspectors, and they are quite busy. They are loaded up from Monday through Friday, working on things, trying to keep up with all the development that's going in town. So this position would provide them the ability to take time off, among other things, but also just a third set of eyes in the field.
Lauren,
Yes.
what's the difference between the combined building inspector and the building permits addition to developmental services? The contract that was presented by...
Oh, sure. I'll take a stab at this, but Matt, if you want to speak to it in more detail. So right now we use a third-party vendor to do building inspections on some of our bigger projects like the station. If there's a specialty involved or if they expect a piece that we can't provide internally, we contract that out and the developer pays for it.
But for regular residential, we handle in-house, and we're going to continue?
We typically handle that in-house unless it's something that's highly unique or complex, like a hospital, where we wouldn't necessarily have the specialty to review a hospital configuration. Otherwise, we do handle all that internally.
But that increase in the main budget, that contract is if we use it or not?
I believe that's a pass-through, right, Matt? Yes, yeah.
I know it's absorbed with the fees. Well, it's a net gain with the fees, but...
The developer
Okay.
pays for that. Yes.
Yeah, developer fees, not the contracted fees. Sorry. Okay.
Yes. We have lots of fees in Matt's department. Any other questions? Okay, shifting over to fire, we are requesting 3 positions. That is part of the growing services that we're providing to our residents and to meet the needs of our growing community. We've also asked for some upgrades from driver engineer to lieutenant positions. This has been a long-time goal of Sachse Fire Rescue, and I believe the City Council is to provide consistent leadership over at Station 2. Right now, I believe that the positions flex between Station 1 and Station 2 on coverage, and this would provide dedicated leadership over and advancement opportunity over at Station 2. Department radio replacements. This is to replace aging radio equipment. It's kind of straightforward. There's not a lot to that, but they are quite pricey. NeoGov onboard and e-forms, as Ms. Nash alluded earlier in the presentation, relative to the war for talent, what we're finding is government is typically viewed as slow, and we're finding that we're pretty slow in the hiring process. So we're looking at any mechanisms in place where we can streamline that process. These NeoGov platforms would allow us to streamline our pre-employment forms, gather information, so we're providing automated responses, we're getting people their information very quickly, and we can move them through the process much faster. It also allows for the streamlining of internal documents that HR uses on a day-to-day basis, and really makes our process less manual and paper heavy and more digital and efficient. CDL program management, that is our commercial driver's license program management, and that is to assist with the compliance of federal regulations relative to drug screenings for the individuals who carry those licenses.
Are we going to do that in-house, or are you going to contract that out?
We'd like to contract that
I would
out.
assume. Okay.
Yes. Sentinel cybersecurity intrusion system. This is to really add to the Mike, help me out here with cybersecurity is
efforts.
quite complicated. Really what this does is it beefs up our cybersecurity platform. We already have many mechanisms in place, but this is an added element that it helps detect threats through the intrusion prevention system and stops them before they hit our firewall, and kind of monitors activity on an ongoing basis. So we have the firewall in place, but this is trying to catch things before they hit the firewall. Is that a fair?
Correct.
Okay. I tried to break it down in layman's terms. Being backup, this is a replacement for our current backup configuration. As you all may or may not know, we have several backups in place for all the data that we have in our network. These backups are really important when you need them, but for the most part, you kind of go on about your business without ever having to use them, and we hope that we never have to use them. But this is a much more robust system. It provides alternating locations for the backup that are off-site, so that if there is, God forbid, some kind of an intrusion and we lose data, it's only lost a week at a time. So it's a better protection and a much better setup for us than our current configuration. And the proposal in your packet includes upgrades to the server for City Hall and for public safety.
Got a question?
Yes, sir.
When we're going through the initial departmental summary, the explanation for IT increasing 11% or $90,000 is tech increases. It was very generic. But this is another $66,000 for supplemental tech or IT or tech increases. So what's the $90,000 increase in the general budget, I guess, increase, or that 11% increase? Is that, I know it's separate from this, but what's it? What licenses or what are we purchasing with that?
Yeah. So what we're finding is we've got quite a bit of equipment that's coming up due for replacement. We're finding that we're adding more software systems to our portfolio of offerings. As I think David alluded to earlier, a lot of what we're doing is becoming digital, so we have lots of platforms to keep up with, which means that we have a lot more agreements for maintenance on those platforms. Mike, is there anything you want to add specifically to that? Or is that covered?
No, that's generally.
Wouldn't the equipment improvements be under VERF, or am I mistaken?
Some of the major equipments would be under VERF, but small tools and equipment is a line item that we have. Some of the smaller items wouldn't be included in the VERF. The VERF is going to be for major capital replacement items.
Okay.
Library meeting room AV upgrades. As many of you will recall, we had to upgrade the AV system in these chambers. The AV was actually recently updated in this courtroom today, and we're very glad that the timing worked out on that. But we're finding that a lot of the AV on this campus was installed 10 plus years ago. It's using technology that is now outdated and is no longer compatible or no longer supported. So we're running into problems, particularly with facilities like our library meeting room. That room is rented out a considerable amount of time, and when individuals rent out that room, there's an expectation that they'll be able to use the projector or the screen or the microphones. And right now we're rapidly losing the ability to provide consistent services on that end. The whole system is geared based on a wireless app that's no longer in existence. So there's no way to wirelessly connect to it. It's a very manual process. It's all incumbent upon having the right cords, and we find it's not a very user-friendly experience for folks who are using that room. Moreover, for programming, we'd like the ability to use that room as it was intended. So we're recommending this supplemental request to bring it back up to par relative to the technology in that room. Shifting over again to the library, A to Z database is a database of electronic resources that are focused on job searches and small businesses. This is an offering that we don't really have available to us, and it provides a number of resources for small businesses that they can utilize. So we think it's a great tool. Niche Academy, this is a really interesting platform. It provides a hub of video tutorials for those who might not be as tech savvy, and it allows them the ability to look up how to use different tools that we have available to them, specifically at the library, but there's a number of tools that are available on that platform as well. So the idea is we have all these platforms available to you. They may not be as easy for you to understand, so we're going to provide you with a tool to help you along with that. Police officers, as you all recall, Chief Sylvester provided you all with an update on a staffing study that was conducted. This proposal is in tandem with that staffing study, so we're recommending 2 positions as part of the supplemental package this year. Leisure Services Coordinator, this position is really going to be a jack of all trades for the Leisure Services Department. As I mentioned earlier, we're really seeing a rise in activity in all of our facilities coming out of COVID and the lockdown scenarios. Unfortunately, as you know, the community center opened at an unfortunate time. So our first year of existence was not quite accurate in terms of use. We've seen that steadily rise since we came out of some of the initial restrictions, and we have had a banner year, and we're seeing significant use of that facility in the programs available there, the camps, etc. Additionally, we're seeing a large participation uptick in our special events, particularly our largest special event, the Red, White, and Blue Blast. Some of our estimates put that as a 25% increase. Moreover, we have not added a special event in a number of years, so if there's ever an interest to do that, we're currently in a position where our staff is at maximum capacity. So we're recommending an additional position be provided to Leisure Services to help with the volume of work over at the community center, but then to also offset some of the work in some of our other Leisure Services facilities and help out with some of the special events. Senior Center upgrades. The age of this campus is starting to show, and it's again showing with our AV over at the Senior Center. It's failing over there. They're pretty limited in what they can do with this space, with the equipment. It's my understanding that the microphone system kind of comes and goes, and the speakers cut in and out, and it's just not usable anymore. So it's time to replace it. Additionally, at the Senior Center, the carpet is 12 plus years old. That is a very active facility. Lots of traffic, whether it's for the seniors who use it on a day-to-day basis or the special events that are held in there. So we're requesting a supplemental to replace that carpet and freshen it up over there.
Lauren, that's just the carpet, that's not the tile floor, correct?
Just the carpet.
The tile floor was replaced a couple years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can confirm what year it was replaced, but
That's
it's
all
just, okay.
Yes is
Just
good.
the carpet. Okay, with that, I'd be happy to turn it back over.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, David, I'm jumping ahead. So this is a summation of the items I discussed. So you can see the dollar amounts here, as Ms. Nash alluded to, that compensation proposal. And then you can see we've identified the items that are one-time as such. And all of this is contained within your packet, so I won't spend a lot of time. I want to make sure that everybody has the ability to read that before I flip over.
Quick question.
Yes?
Just for being fair, are the police radios okay?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure they don't need to be.
Last
replaced.
budget, they were taken care of.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Well, I
Yes.
wasn't here
And
last
some of
budget, so.
some of this one.
They get plenty of toys, don't worry.
With some of the major capital items, we try to cycle them through so we don't hit you with a big
Makes
request
sense.
all at once. These are our remaining items. It's important to note that even with funding all of the requested surplus supplementals, we do have a surplus remaining, so there is still a little bit of money to play with. Are there any questions? Okay, if there are no questions now, I will turn it over to David.
So continuing with the summary, the utility fund is showing here what was submitted as requests and then what is recommended. And showing same for VERF, what is requested from departments and recommended. I can go through any of these if anyone has questions. Maybe I should.
In previous years, we had a list of all supplementals, the ones that were not funded or not recommended. That's not on here.
They are recommended, so it's a list of both, and I can point out the tabs where individually by fund it is there. So
Okay, it was usually in the slide, but that's fine. I don't need another
Actually,
slide.
I
I'm just asking.
I'd like to make a comment on that.
Should be.
All of the requested supplementals this year, I am recommending for approval. So there aren't any that I'm not recommending.
So this is
year.
the full list?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just one point of clarification, I know Lauren touched on this slide. If you go back to the general fund supplementals, the fund book, you had 14,104. That's not 14,000, right?
That is not the total. So the total of the supplementals is $3.1 million,
Right.
taking into account the resources less the supplementals. The funds remaining at that point is $14,104.
Let me, David, I want to,
Yeah, you got to explain.
let me explain it a different way. So as we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, we still don't have all of the final numbers yet from Dallas County relative to our certified values. So as David said, we had to make a conservative, educated guess as to what our total revenues would be. As what's happened in the last 7 budgets presented, we will always have more than what you see is available. The revenue will come in higher. We are projecting as conservatively as possible. Once we understand on August 5th what our actual numbers are, then we'll be able to present to you where the real funds remaining will be. I'm going to kind of go out here on a limb, David. I don't think it's a limb. We have, Finance Department has done various scenarios on what the potential tax rate would be. Remember that we have had significant growth. We cannot go above the 3.5% per the state and Senate Bill 2 that was passed a few years ago. So this is going to assume 2 things: a tax rate reduction of at least 3 cents, if not more, and I won't have that answer until August the 5th, or a little bit past that, plus being able to do all these supplementals. So you will still be able to reduce the tax rate and be able to do these supplementals, and you have those funds remaining there. Again, this is all conservatively budgeted.
I was just going to say, that's all based on the conservative.
Yes, sir,
So
absolutely.
So the savings could be more.
Yes, as happened in the last, again, 7 budgets I presented, we always end up having more when we come back. I just don't like to do that until we're absolutely or positive with our certified values moving forward. Because as David talked about in that budget calendar, I hate that we have to play the chicken and egg game, but because of statutory requirements of presenting you a balanced budget, which is what I'm doing as of August 1st, we still don't get all of the certified information until August 5th. And so we have to give you what we believe is a conservative budget that takes into account all the revenues and expenditures we're expecting, but then we'll come back and be able to, on the 15th, give you a much more exact number, which is typically how we've done our budgets in the past, and we'll be able to give you that with certainty.
We also have conservatism on the expenditure side. Remember, Hub International came and said, all things considered, our rates could go up 26%. So that's included in the budget. We hope that if we had some activity that we hope would fall off, and that as we go out for an RFP, the bids that come in would be less than that 26% growth. So you're seeing conservatism on both sides.
And as another reminder, this does not include your fund balance. So in the end, you still have the fund balance beyond all of the things that we're presenting here.
So Gina, hold on to the mic. The city manager charter contingency for emergencies of unknown origin, is that enough for a true emergency?
Well, so
And I think
we've
of it
been very
as
fortunate the last
water main
7
breaks. I mean, that's what I'm
Right.
thinking. What you tell me something different.
Right. We've been very fortunate the last 7 years that we have not had a situation where we have had to do anything of an emergency nature. But as in talking about it with the staff, we think that we should build that in there, especially because you're talking about spending down your fund balance. That's why I would say that this is just an added cushion if you're going to be spending that down and having that discussion at the next council
So if we
meeting.
took the fund balance to 35 rather than 25, how much would that still leave us? What's the difference between 25 and 35? I'm sure it's more than $100,000.
I only have 4 more slides left.
4 more slides. You need 4 more
Good
slides.
question.
Hold on.
I don't hold on. I want the questions answered.
Okay, so let me summarize. You had a presentation of the base budget, and then the presentation of the supplemental requests. So what does it mean with the current recommendation that all these supplemental requests are funded? So for the general fund, we have revenue of 24 million, operating expenses of that base budget of 21 million. So we have a surplus there of $2.9 million. There are additional funds that are free and available. So the CARES funds of $226,000. CARES funds have already been reported. It's already been reported and used for police salaries, so now it's just sitting in another fund that can be brought to the general fund. So using those resources, we can fund all of our recommended supplemental requests and have revenues over expenditures of just over $14,000 in the general fund. Getting to the big question here, what does all this do to our general fund balance analysis? I came at the long range financial forecast and said we had about $7.6 million, but that was pending any supplemental requests. So when you take into account these supplemental requests and the ongoing supplemental requests continuing on in future years, then as we look at our 25% and 35% target, at the end of the fiscal year of 2023, we would have $6.3 million available to $8.8 million available, depending on if you wanted a 25% or 35% fund balance. If you calculate that we're holding on to the maximum available of our fund balance, so we're retaining 35%, then that means that we have $6.4 million excess fund balance.
It's based on 35%.
Based on 35%. So still in a healthy situation. And as a reminder, so staff will return on August 15th with a detailed plan for a buy down. We've heard from you of the desire to draw that down. We're beyond 35%, so we can find some prudent one-time expenses for that purpose.
Can general fund be used for emergencies or no?
There is in our policy, there is if there is an economic emergency, if we have a downturn, you can use it for those funds. Flooding, yes, the general fund has the most flexibility for emergency items.
Like what Mayor Pro Tem Franks was saying, 100,000 for the city manager, is that enough? Water main break, things like that. Can you use general fund balance in the middle of a fiscal year to just go and grab some if you need it?
We do not budget fund balance, so it's just expenditures that we're budgeting. So this $100,000 would be an expenditure line item for the city manager. Anything beyond that, we would need to return to council, request an appropriation adjustment, and
Can fund balance also be used for salaries?
Can fund balance also be used for salaries? You should use ongoing revenues for ongoing salaries. So to the extent that the fund balance is one
It's
time.
not a general accounting practice, is it?
I'm sorry.
It's not a generally accounted practice to use fund balance money for salaries.
Correct.
That would be for capital items and
Correct. You wouldn't want to use that finite $6.4 million mentioned toward ongoing expenses, yeah, without having ongoing revenue backing.
In other words, it'd be
Inappropriate mix and match from an accounting standpoint.
Yes.
Okay.
So that still brings me back to my original comment. Is $100,000 enough for the emergency fund when we're going to have at least that, multiples in the fund balance for an emergency fund, if you will?
Yes, in my estimation, yes. I do think that,
That's a very generous estimation. I mean, if the difference is 6.3 million to 8.8 million, we got 6.4 based on 35%. So if we go down to 25% for an emergency, that's still way in excess of $100,000.
right,
So is it necessary to have a emergency fund?
it's included in the charter. If we want to take it out of the charter, you certainly can. I'm
Okay.
trying to,
There's lots of things I want to take out of the charter, but yes, we'll go.
probably conversations
Another decision.
another night.
But it's quicker to access, I would imagine, from the city manager's point of view. If she needs that money, she can get it right then versus waiting multiple weeks to get it transferred.
Well, I don't know, because if it's over a certain amount, it's got to come to us anyway.
Well, I was going to say, so let me help here, hopefully. So if we approved it like it was, or excuse me, like it's proposed 100,000, you would have that if it's approved like that, you would have that at your discretion, if you will, to handle an emergency, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and like almost everything in our budget, if we had an emergency that exceeded that amount, you'd be coming to us.
Yes.
It might even be in an emergency situation. Emergency meeting.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And like other reserves, if it's not used, it just goes to the fund balance. It's probably an ongoing request, so that, you know, it's $100,000 kind of always available, but it's not necessarily spent every year to that amount.
So this is more to be in compliance. I mean, I don't want to say it so casually, but if it's the charter is recommending, if the charter states that we should have that, it's more of compliance of the charter.
Yes.
Then it is a true emergency fund.
Right. I mean, I mean, to the mayor's point, I can come to you all for an item that needs to be done. I even have statutory capability through state procurement law that if it is a true emergency of health, life, safety, whatever, I'm able to make that expenditure beyond 50,000 and come back to you to ratify it later. If it was something like a water main break and we needed to bring somebody in and it cost us $200,000. If it was a life, health, safety issue, I could authorize it and come back to the council to ratify it. I do have that capability in extreme situations.
Yeah, fundamentally, I just don't know if it's necessary since we have other means to do it. But if it's going to bring us into compliance with our charter, I think that's the bigger purpose of this for me. Does that make sense?
Understood.
You don't have to agree. I just trying to rationale
she
it
said understood.
in my small brain. Okay, I'm done with this item.
Moving on, looking at the utility fund. If we look at the surplus that was shown to you out of the base budget for the utility fund, we had $2.6 million. Funding the recommended supplemental request still gives us $2.2 million available. And as a summary for the VERF, we have an estimated fund balance at the end of this fiscal year of $1.5 million, taking into account revenues and the budget requests in the 2023 budget. There's still a growing fund balance in the vehicle equipment replacement fund, bringing it to a total of $1.8 million.
1.2.
So next steps from here at the budget workshop, once all your questions are answered, our next meeting is August 15th when the city manager submits the proposed budget to council. And then on September 6th, the request is that budget review the budget and tax, or that council review the budget and tax rate. We'll have public hearings, and ultimately the request is to adopt the budget and adopt the tax rate at that meeting. So from here, if there are any questions, staff is available to respond to those.
I have one statement, request, statement, comment, whatever, on our budget calendar. On September the 6th, City Council meeting, hold public hearings on budget and tax rate, adopt budget. If you're going to adopt the budget, then why are we going to hold public hearings? It's going to be a little late for the public to make any input, meaningful input at that time. My comment is I would like to see the public input meeting held at least a council before we adopt the budget, in case someone has some legitimate requests or we realize that we need to make some changes. It won't be too late to do it, because that to me is transparency. This is not real transparency. It's
not the only one.
It's almost saying, we've already made up our mind, what do you want us to do? And I don't think that's the way we should do it. I think we should have a budget hearing before that time, based on public being able to see the real itemized budget beforehand.
Mayor, can I make a comment on that? So council, you have the option to adopt the budget that night of September 6th. I want to be able to post it that night should you want to, but if you don't, you still have until September 19th to adopt it.
Well, yeah.
So we would list it on there in case there wasn't any feedback, because if we don't list it on there, let's say we didn't get any feedback that night, there'd be nothing we could do to be able to adopt the budget that night. We'd be forced to adopt it September 19th.
Well, I realize that, but to my way of thinking is, when you put it this way, it's sort of intimidating to the public to come up and say, well, hey, by the way, this is something that we need, we want, whatever the case may be, whether it be legitimate or not. at least they have an opportunity to have an input and feel like that it has opportunity to be implemented. Because otherwise, it's going to be intimidating to the point that, well, we're going to adopt a budget tonight. We've had history of some of this happening in the past where you have input and vote the same night. And it's been implicated that basically the decision's already been made before the council starts.
So Gina and the mayor, in previous years, we've had, sorry, Matt, go ahead. I don't get a mic, so I just talk.
Go right there, sir.
I just talk.
Okay. So on the 15th, y'all are presenting the budget to us, correct? Okay. So at that point, the whole city gets a chance to hear about it and email, talk about it, whatever they want for the next 2+ weeks, since we're meeting on Tuesday. And I would imagine that's ample time to present any sort of, concern with the budget at that time. Is that fair to say? Or?
Yes, the budget will be presented on the 15th. The budget will be made available to the public on the website in PDF form, here at City Hall, physical form. It will be available. There will be opportunity for comment, council email, staff email, etc. So to that point, yes.
Rick?
So on the 15th, in previous years, we've had early input on the budget from the citizens. Are we going to have that on the agenda the 15th?
Yes, they can comment on any item.
Yeah, but we
I mean,
usually have an item on the agenda for that.
Yes, and
proposal.
that official item is on the September 6th one where we legally
Right.
have to have a public
Yeah,
hearing.
there's some legal requirements.
Yes, on September, if
You
we do it on
usually have
September
early
6th.
input or early,
Right, which we did in June.
yeah.
But in this case, the public could come and speak August 15th on that action item, if they have anything they want to say then, and then they could come again on September 6th for quote-unquote the official public hearing. That public hearing is really, it's statutory requirement, but anybody could come and speak on the 15th or on the 6th.
When is the public going to be, when is the itemized budget going to be made available for the public to see prior to the 15th so they have time to look at it so they can make some comments?
I don't think it would be. I think it would be on the 15th is when it would be made available. And then you have from the 15th.
If you make it available today and the comments are tonight, they don't have much time to look at it.
Well,
I think for transparency's sake, we really need to make that a little bit longer.
Well, I was going to say, so the way I see it is August 15th, and then
Yes.
August,
72-hour notice.
no, there's no comments from the audience. No.
Yeah.
August 15th is when it would be, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Nash, August 15th is when the budget would be published, correct?
It would actually be published prior to that.
Okay.
Someone from the audience reminded me to say it will be published 72 hours prior. So that Friday, that information would be available. Friday prior, that information would be available.
With the, right, with the agenda posted. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha.
And then we'd have the meeting on Monday, the 15th, for you all to formally have a discussion about it.
Okay, so that's August 12th.
Yes, sir.
And then, so starting August 12th, the budget's published. There will be opportunity for public input on the 15th.
Yes, sir.
That would be offered. And obviously, input in between them, calls, emails, what have you. Then we're gonna have a scheduled public hearing on Tuesday, September 6th.
Yes.
If the council so desires on that night, we can adopt it. If not, then we have another opportunity, September 6th, to have public comment and then adopt the budget as late as September 19th.
Yes.
Okay, so.
Beyond that, we would get into some issues relative to legal requirements for adoption.
Right. So, yeah, because fiscal year starting October 1st.
Yes, sir.
So basically from August 12th to, in theory, if it goes that long, September 19th.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So this evening, we weren't required to allow public input, but that's really at the mayor's discretion. We could have if we chose to do so. August 15th, are we legally required to allow public comment based on the recent changes to the Texas Open Meetings Act?
It's an action item, so yes.
Okay, so we're guaranteeing that the public will have an opportunity to speak on August 15th. This won't be changed later or on the agenda, have comments on there that nobody's going to be allowed.
Statutorily, we couldn't do that.
Okay, good. Going back, I just only have one question throughout the whole budget on the logos. Is this including the whole fleet, or like, for example, if we got a vehicle that we're gonna replace a year from now, are we gonna still upgrade the logo on that vehicle? It's only got less than a year.
I'm much shorter. Great question. So as we've been purchasing new vehicles, we've applied the new logo. So we just factor that in as a matter of course. It's just for those older vehicles that aren't on the replacement schedule or were replaced right before we transitioned logos. We're trying to wait as long as possible to get those transitioned over to logo, but we're at a point now where we need to start spending the money to do the conversion. So it's just a few of those that were swapped over right after the transition.
Okay, so we don't have any vehicle that, you know, it's only got like less than a year of life that we're gonna apply for.
No, we try to stall those out as much as possible and wait until it's time to get replaced.
So the four vehicles, police vehicles that are listed on here right now are actually new vehicles, not replacement for phased out. Vehicles are being phased out. Is that right?
They're replaced.
Let me look at it up. You still have to do it.
So yes and no. So as council is aware, we transition vehicles primarily out of the patrol fleet into other sections of the department for their continued use. They're not frontline patrol vehicles any longer. We have two different types of vehicles in this context. We are replacing two frontline patrol vehicles, which will be rolled out further into the fleet. And we are partnering with Garland ISD to replace two of our aging school resource officer vehicles at 50% cost to the city and shared 50% with GISD. So they're not going into the patrol fleet. They will go to the SRO section in that context, but they also won't cost as much relative to outfitting them with every single piece of equipment that a patrol vehicle has.
Okay, so we're just not adding 4 new vehicles, we're adding,
No.
part of it is
We're
replacement.
replacing 4 vehicles that
Phase
are currently in
one.
the fleet.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Because it doesn't really say that, and I think it would be easier to accept for a lot of people if it was sort of identified for capital equipment items, if it's
I think it
used to
does
phase out
state
stuff, not
school
just
resource
police
officer
department, but
vehicles.
all pieces of capital equipment, if it's identified phasing out replacement, it would be a lot easier to accept and understand to some people that we're not just going out and buying more stuff because we got more money.
Certainly, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I think there's a little bit of confusion. Those vehicles are part of the Vehicle Equipment and Replacement Fund. We have identified a couple of animal services vehicles that need logo replacements. The new vehicles that Chief is dealing with, those would have their entirely separate wraps on them that we're not affiliated with.
Lauren, I had a question on the same supplemental request. Are we planning on updating the water towers in the future? Is that going to be next year's budget? I know that we just did one, so.
We did. Unfortunately, the timing of that was unfortunate because we were hadn't gone through the logo transition process just yet. But we have started gathering that information. We don't have the numbers to present to you as part of this budget package, but we have begun the process of gathering what it would cost to repaint those towers if that was something that the council decided to do.
But it would be in the future.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Different budget.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I got 2 questions. I don't know if they're for you or Mrs. Nash, but one being the compensation recommendations. When we're hiring, because we've had a few new hires recently, are we hiring them at this new level, or do we bring them in and we're going to give them another raise to come in, or are we trying to be proactive in what we're bringing in?
So what we're finding is to be able to be competitive on some of these, we're hiring people in at the midpoint, which is not normally a practice that I like to have.
Right.
Because I want to stay true to the pay plan and keep it consistent, because when you start strengthening the pay plan, you start having issues of compression and all the things that we're talking about. So yes, some of these new folks would get increases if the council adopts the new pay plan.
Okay. But if they were brought in at midpoint, it just probably didn't.
They won't feel the increases the way that current employees would.
And the other thing was, just looking at the different requests, I don't know if I'm speaking out of line here, but with all the new things coming to Sac City, restaurants being one of them. Kind of heard about restaurant inspections and things like that. Is that something, I know we rely on county or, whatnot. Is that something we're maybe looking at for future? To bring?
That's something I'm interested in doing,
Mhm.
is bringing those restaurant inspections to Sac City. Right now, Dallas County does currently provide that service, but I think that that's something as we grow and we get more restaurants, I think we should take on. But that's a program that we'd have to do the analysis of what the cost would be and the fees, and then how that would affect our overall budget. But I do think that's something eventually we need to go to.
Okay.
We have renewed our contract though with Dallas County, but we supplement those services at times with some of our own staff if we get concerns or questions, because it's kind of a service, you get what you pay for. I mean, we don't pay necessarily a lot of money for it, but we don't necessarily get fast service either if we have a question or concern or complaint. So sometimes we have staff that will go in to address it, to handle an immediate issue, and then Dallas County will come and follow up with us.
And is that something we would want to present for next year's budget, or is that something we want, or whatever year we want to, or is that something we could do mid-year to bring someone?
It's something we could do mid-year, but staff has wanted to take some time to do some analysis of that, because I think there's some other programs that we want to look at in addition to that we may be able to kind of combine into one program or one person that's not just that, but some other things as well.
Thank you.
The utility fund supplementals, what are the age and or deterioration of the vehicles that we need to replace these? 703, 707, and 731.
Happen to have that right here.
You knew I'd ask.
Yes, I did. 703 is a 2005, so it's 18 years old and has 124,204 miles on it.
That's just broken in.
707 is a 2010, 13 years old, 91,972 miles. And 731 is 2006, 17 years old, 68,633 miles. So here's something I want to say about that. So I know that some people would say, well, I have a vehicle at home with way more miles, et cetera on them. One of the things you have to remember with all of our vehicles is they spend a lot more time idling than your at-home vehicle. You drive it where you're going to go and you turn it off and you're done for the day. These vehicles tend to idle more, so it puts a lot more wear and tear on them, especially police cars, I can tell you that. They deteriorate, those engines and the associated parts of that car deteriorate a lot faster. And so that's why we end up, replacing those a lot quicker, and we want to make sure, particularly police vehicles, are at the top of their game. But relative to those water vehicles, I mean, you can see the age on those is pretty extensive. And just to kind of, for those of you who have not gone through the vehicle and equipment replacement fund conversation on with the budget, we don't just because a vehicle is up this year to be replaced. We look at all of the vehicles that potentially are up and have a conversation with each department head to say, is this the year to replace this vehicle? Because some years they'll say, well, while this vehicle may be up, I have another vehicle that is in terrible shape that I would like to switch that out with and do instead. Or we kind of want to change our thinking on these vehicles and maybe we want a different type. I'd like to wait 2 years and see if I could get something else instead. So this list is looked at every single year to make sure that we are doing the right things relative to each of the vehicles as situations and things change. And some years they don't need to be replaced, and so we wait, and maybe it's the next year.
Other questions for staff?
I noticed that we have requests for 10 new employees positions. Is that right? Collective, all of them added up?
I think it's 8. I'm sorry.
Maybe I counted wrong.
Yes. It's 8 positions.
Okay. Planner 1, building inspector 2, firefighters 3, that's 5. upgrade drivers and engineers, 3 more, that's 8.
That's not
Those aren't
hiring
new employees.
Those are just promoting 3 people.
Hmm?
That's just promoting 3 people, it's not new.
Firefighter
No, on the
positions.
firefighters, those are new. So
Okay, they're
the-
not new positions, they're promotions.
No, sir, on the firefighters, those are 3 new positions.
Okay,
The
firefighter.
driver engineers to lieutenants, those are upgrades. Those are
Okay.
reclassifications.
Okay.
8 in the general.
Police officers, 2,
Yes, sir.
okay. And
The leisure
planner,
services
1.
coordinator in recreation, 2 police
Yeah,
officers,
recreation.
3 firefighters, a combination building inspector, and a planner.
That's broken out between general fund and utility fund. Correct.
So those are all positions funded in the general fund.
8 in the general fund and
That's what I meant.
1 in the utility fund for a total of 9.
Yeah, that's right.
There was 1 in the utility
Oh, I'm
fund.
sorry, I thought this was, yes, there is one in utility fund.
Or did you have a question?
Are we gonna go, by department and look at this, or should I just email some questions I have on some of those?
We can do whatever you'd like, Councilwoman, it's up to you.
Ask away. That's what we're here for.
In the human resources, budget worksheet, I noticed the budget is quite a bit lower for wages and salaries. Is that because y'all aren't fully staffed? Has it been down like? Plus have new staff and that salaries? Chrissy, can you come up to just
All right, I'll restate it, or go ahead and restate it.
She's going to say it again.
Right, yeah, because we got to get it on the microphone. So the HR positions, we had a change in staff, and so there was a change in salaries, and that's why the salary number went down.
This next question is probably for you, Ms. Nash.
Okay.
Why do we pay so much for copier fees?
Actually, that is a question for, sorry, that is a question for David Baldwin.
It's in every department.
I'm working on getting a handle on that. The budget overall is correct. So sometimes there is some shifting between departments. One of my many projects in this upcoming year will be identifying the printers, identifying the costs, and allocating that correctly between the departments. As to the overall, so I think if you're looking in those numbers and you're seeing a department, in one department, a growth in the budget, there are offsets in other departments. It's really me just shifting, looking at actual costs and trying to budget it appropriately, so in the right place in the current fiscal year, or in the current budget year.
David, can you explain how that contract is allocated across the city? One contract? Generally, can you explain that?
I don't think he wants to.
Okay.
There is, I believe, a base charge per printer device. There are meters, I believe, that look at the black and white and color copies, and we're charged based on that. How about I keep it that simple?
That's great.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
As opposed to purchasing and maintaining them ourselves.
And replacing them
And
ourselves,
replacing.
correct, yes.
Because they always work.
So that way we do with our printers, it comes with service. So, it's just a phone number to call up all those technical issues. Somebody comes right away and fixes that. So there's a lot more. And I guess the analysis in the past has said that that's the proven way to go.
And in the municipal court department, I see the prosecuting attorney fees and the municipal court judge fees are the same from last year, but since we executed that contract tonight, will that be updated next time, or does it stay the same?
No, so those contract fees, we were able to contain existing costs in that budget. So even with the new contract, with the budget, or with the contract increase, we can still maintain the current budget.
Sorry for all the tedious questions.
Great job.
There are no tedious questions.
And lastly, in the facilities maintenance budget, we have a hazardous waste bio-clean jail fee, and we don't have a jail.
You were just gonna let us get up there and just.
I don't know, Center City? Is it a line item?
It's a line item, yeah.
Can you-
In the custodial services contract?
Can I ask that page number?
Yes, 39. Because the
Curious for the
flooring
answer now.
upkeep cost is almost as much as new carpet, so just wondering how that works. Oh, I'm sorry, it's page 40 on the next page.
But it calls out jail.
Yeah, I think we do have biohazard cleanup fees, not necessarily associated with the jail. When we did have the jails, it's considerably a lot more than that. We just reduced it. So when they do have a biohazard incident at the jail or in the fire department, we have a service that we call to have that cleaned up.
Thank you. And I think that's it for me, thank you.
Other questions for staff? Okay.
Let's see this. Most of these supplementals are ongoing expenses. They're additions to the base for next year. What is our plan for, we're adding a bunch of new employees, but we have no guarantee that the economy is going to keep chugging along like it has been. It's a little, uncertainty level of COVID is high. I think our economic uncertainty right now is fairly high. It's just kind of a crapshoot what's going to happen the next couple of years. What do we do if our numbers look way worse than we're expecting? Do we just not spend these? Do we fire people?
I'd say a couple of things. One is in all the projections that we are looking at long range, we believe that we will still continue to stay stable with our revenues, and if nothing, we're going to see some increases. So we feel very strongly that we can sustain with what we're asking for here, and that we won't have to do anything relative to that kind of thing. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball, so I couldn't have predicted COVID, so I certainly am not going to be able to predict any kind of major crashes, but we believe that it's sustainable. Frankly, what we're dealing with right now is we didn't slow down during COVID in terms of expansion projects in the community, and what we're finding is that we are really behind where I would like us to be in terms of the workload. And it's because we don't have enough staff, and we have sustained these levels of staff and we had far less work to do. And so in order for us to continue to achieve the goals that we want to achieve relative to expansion and diversification of the tax base and all the things that we've been talking about the last 7 years, we need these positions in order for the staff to be able to be effective. Now, do I know that we're going to end up tapering off growth at some point? Yes, and I think that some positions as folks retire will phase out, and I think some things will change, because we'll still see that we will need employees here to do the things. They may just be doing different things. And so Matt Robinson and I have had long conversations about what does that mean in terms of his department, and how are we going to morph and change some of these positions. But we don't see a stop in growth in the next few years, and he needs somebody besides himself to be able to do the appropriate plan review and things that we need to do in-house. Honestly, we touched on this a little bit, but with the fees that we have that offset with hiring Bureau Veritas to do plan review and inspection, it's very expensive that we're passing this off to the businesses, and they'll pay it, but it's not very business friendly. It's quite a bit more expensive than the services we provide. And so we believe we can do a better job because we have staff that would be more invested in the process. I know the staff has not loved that we've used Bureau Veritas a whole lot more in the last few years, but it has been out of necessity because of the amount of workload that we've had. But I believe that we need to be able to start getting to some more proactive projects, particularly in the planning department. There are a lot of things that I'd like to see us do that we simply can't get to, because Matt is the only person really that can review and approve plans. And we've got just an overwhelming amount of work that we've had the last couple of years. So, to answer your question, I believe wholeheartedly that we can keep these positions in check and that they will be able to be highly productive. And we will get to a point when development stops, and we will have to retool and readjust at that time. But I stand firmly behind it.
Last call for questions. Well, I want to take this opportunity to commend staff for an excellent presentation. I am especially impressed with the fact that if the council ultimately approves all the supplementals, we'll still be able to decrease our tax rate, which in this environment I think is almost a minor miracle. I can tell you, in talking to some of my newfound mayoral buddies in the cities, they would not die to have our problem. They are more limited by SB2. And I have to admit, a few years ago, I really thought that that would be a really, really big challenge for us. And it may be a challenge for us in the future, but again, it's just an outstanding job. Staff has got us here to where, at least this year anyway, we don't have to worry about this SB2. And for that, you're to be commended, and I want to say thank you. And I look forward to the public's input next time, and ultimately getting this budget and tax rate adopted. Any other questions? With that, we are adjourned at 8:31.